Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
Okay.
Okay.
We're
here.
is about the energy I can summon for 3 Elaine chapters.
Yeah, it's rough. I don't know why Robert Jordan would do that. I feel like as an author, you have to have some self-awareness of, like, point of view exhaustion. Like, I
thought you were about to say, as an author, you have to know which of your characters are insufferable and which are not.
I mean, I feel like you also have to know that. I think you do have to have the awareness of, like, how points of view come off.
Yeah, sure.
I like to write from multiple points of view. And I cannot fathom offering 3 chapters in a row from the same point of view. Unless it was, like, 100% plot relevant. And I know the idea is that, like, in Camelin, of course it is 100% plot relevant. That it comes from Elaine's point of view.
Is it, though?
But also there's Avienda and Brigitte and other people who are points of view characters who can offer, I think, more interesting perspectives than just getting it from Elaine all the time. So I just don't really understand. Like, we've referenced before, Robert Jordan kind of had, like, a point of view hierarchy. Like, if you're in certain scenes, if, like, Rand and Min are in, that's probably a bad example, because oftentimes we will get Min points of view. But typically, if Rand is in the room, Rand is going to be the point of view character, because he's kind of the guy, you know?
That just shows you that Robert Jordan has at some point come to the realization, because I think pretty strictly he was with Rand whenever Rand was in the room for the first few books, and then at some point he was like, I will start deviating, and even when Rand is in the room, I will go to other points of view. And so I wish he'd get there with Elaine, but, like, yeah, it's to bring in our we don't watch Outlander product. We just finished the Atlas 6, which is also moves through many points of view, and it alternates each chapter, and I just was, like, trying to picture, like, a Libby point of view 4 chapters in a row or whatever, and I was like, I would have not finished the book.
I think, like, there's a reader response thing going on. I think we've referenced reader response theory on the podcast before, which is, like, the literary theory that, like, the actual product of a book exists between the author and the reader. Like, the reader has plays a role in creating the product, the literature. And of course, I think that comes in to being, like, you have to understand how the reader will respond in a certain extent. And if you have multiple points of view, there's a 100% chance that someone is going to not like one of your characters, you know, or an almost 100% chance, because people are very different. Not every reader is going to like or dislike the same characters, but I think it is unrealistic to believe that every reader will love every single one of your points of view. That's just not how, like, humans work. Go ahead.
Just to get it in there, this is Everybody Hates Rand.
Yeah, sorry.
Your friendly neighborhood real-time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
And I'm Sally Goodger, who is on my soapbox for sure. On. And maybe, like, hate is a strong word, but, like, even in books where I, like, generally like all the points of view characters, like the Raven cycle, occasionally you'll get to a point of view and be like, I'm very annoyed that I'm with Gansey right now instead of a character that I personally find more interesting.
Yeah, I find it usually that in books that have a lot of varied points of view, you end up, I think this is a pretty natural response, you just sort of naturally pick your favorite.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the one that you're, like, looking forward to.
Sure.
For whatever reason. Maybe it's their relevance to the plot, or maybe you just enjoy that character's voice more. Whatever. For a long time, for us, it was Matt.
Sure.
And now we're finding Matt chapters even to be something of a drag. But Elaine has never been at the top of anyone's list as far as I know.
Yeah, and so, I mean, dear God, I would be almost afraid to meet the person whose Elaine is at the top of their list. So
like, nothing. I bet they're really into the British monarchy.
they were really upset when the Queen died.
They have a keep calm and carry on poster.
So I think, like, if you're an author who's writing multiple points of view, you need to have, like, an understanding that, like, it will be unpleasant for certain readers if you have multiple chapters in a row from a character that they don't like. And I just feel like that is, like, such a risky gamble to be like, am I going to, like, from a stylistic point of view, to just be like, am I going to make readers suffer? That's why I think it is, like, really risky in these books when you just, like, don't have a single point of view character in the entire book. Like, books where there's no egg. Or Path of Daggers where there's no Matt at all. Like, I think that's really wild. But it's also really difficult in a series like Wheel of Time where there is no, like, boundary on who is a point of view character and who is not. To, like, I understand why Robert Jordan makes that choice at certain times. Just be like, we cannot be with Matt right now. There's too much else going on. I don't know. If you can't tell, I'm a little sick. So my thoughts may not be super coherent. But I've also been thinking a lot about, like, points of view because the own project I'm working on, I'm at a stage where I'm adding more points of view and I'm, like, really wrestling with whether or not that is actually the right choice for the plot or just something I want to do because I like writing in those characters' voices, you know? And also I was thinking the same thing about the Atlas 6 and how I really like that it's, like, almost a pattern. Like, you will get a point of view from each of the 6 characters and then it will start over.
Yeah,
not necessarily in the same order. Like, it's not like Libby, Nico, et cetera, like, it's not a set order, but it's like we're checking in with everybody at each stage of the book. I actually really enjoyed that, so I don't love these. And it's not even just with Elaine. Like, it can get exhausting when you just have points of view never ending from the same character in the same setting in a book that is so vast. Anyway.
Yeah, I find it particularly frustrating that these very long sets of points of view chapters, you know, we're getting, what has it been, 5 chapters with Elaine, I think.
Yeah.
And that's all happening within not just the same day, but within a few hours.
Yeah, that's a good point, Emily.
And that's generally what's happening in these later books. We had a bit of a deviation from that with our sort of bigger Matt section earlier, where we got to be with him over the course of a few weeks.
Yeah.
And I think that made that chunk of time feel more manageable. Mm-hmm. Although, of course, we're also biased toward Matt, so I don't know how objective that is. But that's just one thing that I find really frustrating with Elaine points of view, is that they're almost always taking place over, like, very brief amounts of time, but so many pages. And so many of those pages are devoted to sort of things that clearly could be edited out because they're just not relevant to us.
Yeah.
It's hard to justify the Andor plot in general at this stage in the series. Like, Andor is only relevant because we're being told over and over again that it's relevant.
Yeah.
But at a certain point after Rand left Camelin, you know, it's kind of like, okay, well, we don't really care about this place anymore because the Dragon Reborn has secured it, more or less, so...
Yeah, and also, like, our horizon of expectations comes into this, too. I know Elaine is going to win the throne because of the story that I'm in and the way things have played out for the characters so far. I think we've said this before, so I'm really sorry if we're rehashing ground, but, like, it is absurd that the Andor plot takes this long when we all know Elaine is going to win.
Yeah, this might have paid off if Elaine hadn't won.
Yeah.
Or if there had been some sort of, like, late-stage twist. Mm-hmm. But everything happens very much according to, like, the archetypes required by this genre.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, archetypes, as we've talked about before, and tropes and cliches are a form of shorthand.
Yeah.
So when you're both enforcing all of those archetypes and tropes and cliches and just staying with them the entire time, you're leaving readers quite bored.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, one of the main problems with Andor, along with the fact that Elaine herself is not a very likable narrator. She's particularly not likable right now when Robert Jordan is on his whole aren't pregnant women so funny shtick.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's difficult to derive any enjoyment from this. And now Avienda's gone, so I don't even have Avienda to look forward to.
I know. I don't understand why Avienda is just sort of snatched away from this plot.
She has to go on a vision quest in the Gathering Storm, but that won't be till, like... Actually, I don't think she even makes it to her vision quest till Towers of Midnight. God damn it.
This series is too long.
I know, it sure is.
And I'm just a little tiny guy in a big universe.
I'm just a little guy struggling fruitlessly to get to the next map point of view.
Yeah, and even then,
who knows what will happen.
Yeah, I'm just in I'm on the Titanic has sunk, and I'm grasping for pieces of floating doors, and those pieces of floating doors are just like Grady and Niald.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of Titanic metaphors these days because my nephew's obsessed with the Titanic.
All the fancy food sunk to the bottom of the ocean.
He's really upset by the whole ordeal. Avienda's gone. Avienda left at the end of the first of these 3 chapters. The wise ones came and got her and were like, time to go, bucko, because the Ale are heading out. And Elaine's like, well, where are y'all going? And they're like, we don't know. Or I'm not allowed to tell you specifically. Rand sent new orders, and now we're just piecing out. And it's like, it's so interesting how Rand can just, like, leave the Ale and Bashir Saldeans stationed in Andor this entire time without asking Elaine's permission.
Yeah.
And now he's just like, goodbye. Hope this doesn't affect you politically. And, like, luckily it doesn't, because Elaine didn't use the Saldeans or the Ale as the main force of her army, but, like, she could have. Because Rand offered them to her.
Yeah, Rand told her specifically to do that.
So, like, just Rand, being Rand. This is all after Elaine and Avienda finally made it to Elaine's apartments, a process which was dragged out because Elaine got lost on the way to her room. Everyone notices this. Elaine assumes that she's just having pregnancy brain, and so she's all annoyed about it, and it isn't until later that Brigitte's like, no, the layout of the palace has physically changed.
Yeah.
And Elaine's like, what the fuck? And Brigitte's like, yeah, maybe if you hadn't snapped everyone's head off telling us not to talk about it, we could have talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
But here we are. In Elaine's apartments, the only thing of note that happens is that, Elaine and Avienda discover that Avienda has a special talent where she can pick up a terangrial and know what it does.
Yeah.
This is a talent that is overall useless. It could have been more useful, considering Elaine has had this giant batch of terangrial, etc., that I guess Avienda just hasn't been picking up, and has not been invited to examine or do anything with. So, like, we've had these multiple asides where Elaine's like, here I am experimenting with terangrial, and it's like, you're telling me that Avienda's been there the entire time, and Avienda could have just known these things?
Yeah, like, I'm torn between this being extremely funny and sort of Avienda's just, like, stay in my lane, sort of, I don't know what my girlfriend is doing.
Doesn't everyone know that this box makes music?
Yeah, like, if Elaine is too much of a silly goose to figure out what the terangrial will do, that's not my Avienda's business. Oh, sorry. Bonk. But yeah, it's also really frustrating because it, like, negates both all the things Elaine has done as sort of this, like, quasi-scientist or quasi-archaeologist trying to figure out these things from the past. It just, like, negates all that work by being like, we don't actually have to do any of that exploration. We're just sort of, like, getting rid of that entire plot device that we don't know what these magical items do, and therefore they are kind of dangerous. We're just totally negating that by being like, we can use teleportation to send Avienda anywhere to figure out what these magical artifacts do, which I find kind of annoying. Mm-hmm. Just, like, you can't just keep, like, erasing your plots.
Yeah.
At this late stage of the series. And what else was I going to say? So it negates everything that Elaine does. Whatever, I don't remember my second point, but...
I think a lot of people have pointed out how annoying it is that in the later the books, these, like, talents, capital T talents, keep just, like, stacking on themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like Egg has a talent for everything, Avienda and Elaine and Nynaeve, like, between them, they're just, like, the most magical girls in the world.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a little bit ludicrous.
Yeah.
You know, first of all, because we've already been told, wow, these are the most powerful women in the entire world. Only for Robert Jordan to be like, oh, except for this random Shanjin woman and this old lady who they found, you know, in the wilds of Camelin or whatever the fuck. So having them have all of these talents is just sort of like very transparently a plot device.
Yeah.
For Robert Jordan to tell us some form of exposition that he wouldn't be able to get across otherwise. And the frequent asides to the Terangriol, because this is something that's been repeated, I believe, in every book since they've uncovered this Ebudari horde of Terangriol, is either Elaine experimenting with them or Avienda now listing them off. And I'm no longer sure what the purpose of that is.
Yeah.
It's just becoming repetitive. The existence of Terangriol and Angriol and Sa'angriol is like a fine part of Robert Jordan's world building. It's an interesting way of enforcing that this is an old world where artifacts are magical and are sort of an obsolete form of technology. That's very interesting, but if you're not doing anything with them, then it becomes pointless. The only things that, you know, Elaine and Avienda use from this horde are the Angriel and Sa'angriel that they find. Just Angriel, I guess. Like, Nynaeve has all that jewelry that she took. I think they've both got a couple of Angriel, and now Elaine has this magic knife that will hide her from the Dark One.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me, one, that they only really seem to use the ones that are weapons. Like, you've got this shit that does really cool stuff. Like, I think a large part of, for me, what makes the cleansing of Sidon so satisfying is the sort of, like, it is one instance when, like, the length of the series is a benefit, because we first see the Choden Call in book 2, and just keep getting hinted, and Rand's piecing together what all these artifacts do, and then he finds a piece of ancient technology that he uses to correct something very fucked up with the world. Like, that's really cool and interesting. But that's, like, the only time I feel like so far. And then Matt's Foxhead is also very interesting and is used in a very interesting way. That's, like, 2 instances out of 1 million Angriel. So, yeah, it's annoying to me that, like, we've got one very creative and interesting use of these artifacts that do a variety of things. Otherwise, Nynaeve is just using her jewelry to, like, store more of the power and be able to draw more of the power. Elaine is using it just to hide from the Dark One, which I guess is really interesting, but also, like, what? How does that one even work?
I don't know if that even comes up, really.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
So,
Yeah, it's just, like, this is a thing in the fantasy genre, and you know it's a thing in the fantasy genre because it's in Dungeons & Dragons. The idea that there are magical items.
Sure.
That's very much a hallmark of the genre. And in Dungeons & Dragons, for example, like, a careful GM will make sure that you can't just have a bunch of magic items off the bat. You know, you have to work for them, and then you might be offered a slim selection, and then you only have enough money to choose, like, a few of them that you think will be very important. There are limits to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Robert Jordan seems to have been following that logic in the early stages of this series, but now he's just like, I'm just going to give them the whole horde, but they just don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
And it's like, then what's the point of giving them the horde?
Yeah, Dungeons & Dragons is such a good example. What I don't know a ton about Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not an expert, but, like, what little I know of the game and also what little I know about, like, game theory is, like, part of what makes the stories that you find in Dungeons & Dragons campaigns, and like Emily said, if you have a good GM, the rise of actual play sort of shows and podcasts or whatever, if you have a really good GM who's using the game mechanics very smartly and very carefully, it adds to the story rather than just being like, you're telling a story and you're also playing a game. And, like, there's a lot to be learned from the game mechanics of, like, Dungeons & Dragons specifically as applied to, like, fantasy and other formats. Like, it is actually, I think, very valuable and important to think of, like, what type of game you might be presenting, like, what type of level are your characters at, what point are they in the story, like, what are they getting in order to, like, solve the plot in an interesting way, and you're like, right, Robert Jordan has just completely fucked over his own game mechanics.
Yeah, I think the word I'm looking for is economy.
Yeah,
like, he's fucked over the economy of, like, magic and magic items by creating characters who are vastly OP.
Yeah.
Compared to where they began the series, so now he's doing things to, like, casually reduce their power, like making Elaine pregnant.
I can't even talk about it today. But yeah, like, we've referenced multiple times of, like, in a series of this length, you need to continually up the stakes. I disagree, actually. I don't think I think it's fine to have at some point sort of set the stakes and we just kind of have to get through them to the end. I don't actually think I need to keep having bigger and bigger and bigger bosses until I fight the big final boss. I think it's fine to have, like, a certain level of stakes and threat to just get through. Robert Jordan seems to feel the need to continually up the stakes, like, every fucking chapter, which makes these last couple books I just feel a little overstimulated, honestly, when reading them, because just too much is happening. So you're right, like, there's a certain level of, like, upping the stakes by giving everyone all these talents and they're so overpowered, but at the same time we have to, like, cap them. We have to nerf them in really weird ways, and it's just like, again, this is why a study of game mechanics might be helpful. Like, if you're just like, at what point in this game do they need to be able to do this?
Yeah, I think you're talking about bigger and bigger bosses. We are beginning to feel very much like a mid-2000s, like, it feels like we're in season 13 of Supernatural.
That's a good way to put it.
You know, like, at a certain point you're like, God, just let it end.
Yeah.
I feel like we've defeated the boss already. I know we haven't literally defeated the Dark One, but at this point the stakes are so high, God's just walking around, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's just getting a little bit ridiculous. Anyway, Avienda leaves. Elaine goes and meets with some mercenaries who are no longer, thanks to Charles Gaibon, the bulk of her forces, but are still a significant portion of it. Significant enough that she can't really risk alienating them. And they're basically like, we want more money. And she's like, no. And that's the extent of the meeting. I'm not quite sure why it happened.
Also pretty funny her to be like, I can't alienate them.
And then she yells at them.
And then she's like, I'm not going to pay you anymore. Why would you ask that? And they're like, we are literally, like, mercenaries. The whole thing is that you pay us to fight for you.
And then they leave, and she's like, I didn't handle that very well, did I? And everyone's like, well, we don't really know a better way you could have handled it. And then I'm like, so, Robert Jordan, why did you put this scene in there?
Yeah.
To show me that Elaine is a moderately competent ruler. Yeah. Sometimes she doesn't do the best thing of all time. Yeah. Sometimes she doesn't come up with the world's best solution. I don't know. They're also there briefly to have one of them allude to knowing Hatchet Face, because Hatchet Face is there and Elaine sends him off. And then someone's like, oh yeah, it's funny that he ended up here. And she's like, oh, did you know him? And they're like, yeah. Again, the end. We already knew Hatchet Face was a mercenary, so not sure why it's there. After they leave, Elaine has one of her meetings with Halwyn Nori and Reen Herfor. Nori reports that he's found a guy who he thinks can successfully tail Hatchet Face. There was a scene in the last book where Hatchet Face was like, God, I keep getting followed. Someone from the palace clearly wants to follow me. Too bad I keep murdering those idiots.
Yeah.
And apparently now we're getting the other side of the story where Elaine and Halwyn Nori are like, we have sent 5 people. They can't possibly have all been killed by thieves. And I'm like, you could have eliminated the possibility of them all getting killed by thieves after, like, the second guy.
Yeah.
You know, after a certain point, the modus operandi, for one thing, is too similar.
Yeah.
But no, they just sent 3 more guys to their deaths.
Yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah, R.I.P. those probably underpaid laborers. Anyway, now they found a guy who's totally disposable because he's also a criminal. A guy who's like a really successful thief. And of course he's presented to Elaine and has a dialect that he uses.
Naturally.
An uneducated, per se, dialect. And he insists that he's innocent, and this is just sort of like really reinforces all of Elaine's upper class beliefs about people who are criminals and people who belong in prison, and so it's just kind of annoying.
Yeah, like, this guy's option, she's like, you'll either hang for all of your crimes, or you can do this for me, and I will put a spell on you that I always know where you are.
And I'm like, successful thievery is suddenly a hanging offense?
Yeah, like, this guy, I'm obsessed with this guy, because they're like,
so funny.
We know he's a thief because he likes to keep trophies, and he just has, like, 1 million stolen coin purses in, like, a chest in his house.
And I'm like, that's baller.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, it's stupid, but,
like,
it's fucking baller.
Yeah, it is both... It, like, makes him the perfect character because he's just, like, obviously very successful and obviously, like, a little bit of a dumbass. And I'm like, that's my favorite kind of character.
This is Matt Cathon in another life.
In another life.
He's like, I am the world's most successful person at stealing other people's money, but, like... Yeah, very good at just stealing people's money, and I don't think we have any evidence that he's done anything worse than basically pickpocket people, like, steal their wallets.
Yeah.
And it's like, just because he's prolific at that doesn't mean that it's any worse of a crime. It's your own fault for not catching him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he did good.
Yeah, it's so annoying to me. Like you said, it's just reinforcing Elaine's upper class attitudes that, stealing is somehow the worst crime in the world when she's literally just admitted to basically murdering 5 people by forcing them to follow Hatchet Face.
Yeah, so they're like, either you hang for your crimes or you have to follow this extremely deadly guy without really giving him the information on why this man is so deadly. But they're like, yeah, we just think that we'll have a success rate. So presumably this guy will eventually lead them to the Dark One's hideout.
Yeah.
Which is what they've been looking for. Then again, Elaine also puts a little spell on his, like, belt shit.
Yeah.
And is like, I'll always know where you are with this. And I'm like, why the fuck didn't you do that to Hatchet Face?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
What? You're telling me there's been a magical solution all along?
This really does feel like an episode of Supernatural.
I know.
Very obvious plot hole. You just put it on Hatchet Face.
Yeah, this spell that I've never heard of before.
Yeah, leave my home. I can't even remember his name. I think it's Samwil.
Yeah, Samwil, not Samwell.
Yeah.
DMG. Samwil something.
Samwil, yeah.
Samwil kill God.
Leave him alone. He's obviously, and it's not like he's like living in some huge mansion. He seems to be a guy who just likes to steal, and I think that's fine. Leave him alone and just like direct your attention towards Hatchet Face.
Yeah, agreed.
Lee, you were
stupid. Anyway, then they get, Rain Harfor is like, yeah, my spies in Aramilla's camp says she's really confident that they're gonna break in any day, but caveat, Aramilla is also very stupid. And we'll get a point of view from her later in this chapter that will enforce that. So what her confidence has to do with anything, I don't really know. Elaine then gets news that Diellen has returned from going to the camp of all of the other major Andoran houses who support neither Elaine nor Aramilla and are just sort of like third-party observing off in the distance. Diellen has been trying to convince them to join Elaine, but simply cannot. Because they're like, Diellen, we want you to be queen. And Diellen's like, I will not be queen. And for some reason, they're like, well, we don't believe you.
But then no one will be queen.
Then no one can be.
Feels, pretty poignant given what's happening in the United States Congress right now.
There is no Speaker of the House. Anyway, so while they're meeting about this, they're interrupted by all of the dummy teenagers who are sort of supporting Elaine, and they're very annoying, except for the one smart little boy who basically looks at their map of all their forces and is like, the Borderlander contingent sure doesn't make sense tactically, does it? Unless it is actually inspiring everyone to just basically calls out their plan right there. And Elaine's like, dear God, we've been had by a 12-year-old. And this kid's like, yeah, because you all are fucking stupid.
Yeah, he's like, listen, any child, comme moi, with a basic military education.
Also, comme moi.
Can see what you're doing. And
Yeah.
she's like, no, this is like super smart. I thought of it myself. So, I don't really know what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, we've already said we don't know what the point of having these four be introduced as characters is. I particularly don't know why Robert Jordan is hung up on being like, and this kid's distinguishing feature is that he's incredibly intelligent, because, like, unless we're going to be spending another 20 books with these people, and thank God we don't, it really doesn't matter what this kid is like. Because he's either going to be dead in the last battle, or we're going to be done after the last battle. Presumably soon. So, whether or not he grows up to be, like, Andor's prime minister or whatever is irrelevant to me.
Yeah.
No, God, Ed. Elaine then goes back to her room, and finally we get an exciting update on the murder mystery that is ongoing.
Yeah.
Now, Rianne? Is that her fucking name?
I think something.
The fact that we have Reen Harfor and Rianne Corley is very confusing. Rianne Corley, who we saw in the last section, is murdered.
Yeah, dead.
Very blatantly, Van Deen informs us, killed by the One Power. Apparently because many other people have recently been killed by the One Power. A lot of kinswomen who have been assumed runaways, but are actually dead. And evidence was left that they were dead, not runaways. But Elaine and company were too dumb to see the evidence. So now the murderer is like, I must be more blatant with my murders. And showing them that there's a channeler loose who's killing ladies.
There's a horse loose in the
There's
hospital.
a horse loose in the hospital. There's a Black Aja loose in the Palace of
There's
Kingland.
a Black Aja member loose in every
Literally
home in the
every,
continent.
I know, every square mile. There's multiple Black Aja.
I don't
It's irrelevant
understand their numbers.
And they're just killing kinswomen left and right.
They're just doing a lot of murders.
Who, frankly, I didn't care all that much about the kinswomen to begin with, so I don't know what the purpose of murdering them is. Elaine's like, why would they do this? And I'm like, is it just because Robert Jordan is still like, yeah, everyone's last order was let the Lord of Chaos rule, and everyone's just interpreting that as murder spree. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? It's not like Saritha or Carrie Ann, whichever one of them it is, I honestly can't remember.
They're basically interchangeable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're like, I have concocted a devious Sesevenin plot, you know, to psychologically torment you specifically, Elaine, because you're so important, you know? Yeah. It's just like someone's like, I'm doing the murders. So anyway, that's only exciting because any murder at this point is slightly exciting.
At least it's something that happens.
Yeah, at least it's something that happened. Like, R.I.P. Rianne, I guess, but I don't really care. She just was there for a long time.
Yeah, like, she was fine. She was a fine character. Kind of nice to see competent people doing kind of competent things.
I don't know. We then switch over to Aramilla's camp, where we are informed that Aramilla is the worst person alive, and everyone in her camp is the worst person alive.
Mm-hmm.
And she has just received word that someone will take payment from her. Presumably the mercenaries that Elaine just spurned.
Yeah.
But, you know, who knows?
Who knows?
All indications in Robert Jordan's writing, if not the narrative specifically, are telling us that the Camelin plot is going to come to a head soon. Of course, we've been thinking the Camelin plot would come to a head for the last 3 books, and now it finally is. We only know it is because we have the advantage of hindsight.
Yeah, we've read Knife of Dreams.
But Robert Jordan could theoretically have dragged this on for another 3 books.
Yeah, it's insane. And also, it really bothers me that Aramilla is such just, like, a blatantly terrible person. One, because, like, don't we have enough of that in Wheel of Time already?
Yeah.
But it's just this, like, further driving home of the plot that we already know, that Elaine is not only the rightful heir to the throne, but also, like, the correct heir to the throne, because she is good and just, unlike Aramilla, who is
a real Karen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and just, like, actively bullying and torturing all of her followers. And it's, like, it would be much more interesting to see, like, to legitimately see Elaine and Diel. That's a bad example, because obviously I would want Diel to win.
Yeah.
Elaine and someone who's, like, more evenly matched in character and politics vie for the throne.
Yeah, like, Elaine is better than Aramilla on the surface level, but as we've kind of talked about, like...
point.
Elaine is also still sending people to their deaths, convicting a thief to hang for the crime of thievery.
Stealing isn't even a real crime.
No, shut up. Stealing from rich people, whatever.
It's like shoplifting from Target.
Yeah.
Or Walmart, actually.
Yeah,
maybe
shoplifting from major corporations is not shoplifting.
Yeah, it's
hardly counts as anything. Allegedly.
Yeah, for legal reasons, that was a joke.
For legal reasons, that was a joke. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I don't want to talk about Elaine anymore, so sorry this wasn't a very fun episode, but it's like, you know, for every billion bees and 4 feral raccoons, you have to have a really long discussion about how Robert Jordan is violating game mechanics and game theory. Alf Seeger would be thrilled.
Alf Seeger is one of our professors in college. I took a video games and storytelling class from him, which is extremely good, and that's where I'll admit, rudimentary understanding of game mechanics come from, but it is a very interesting way to look at and analyze both games, obviously, and stories themselves, which have a game element to them, 100%. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, game theory, look it up if you're interested.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We've been thinking and talking a lot about Dungeons and Dragons in this house, so it's the brain.
It's on the brain.
The last thing I want to say is that I think it is cool that the Palace of Camelin is changing layout. I just think that's neat.
Yeah.
And I wish that was the plot in Camelin, not a war.
Yeah, it's a fun new bubble of evil.
Yeah.
Maybe not new. I think we've had stuff like that happening in the White Tower already. But it is a fun, mechanic, I guess, that Robert Jordan is using. Having the world of the familiar become unfamiliar and sort of labyrinthine.
Yeah.
In this late stage of the world sort of unraveling in structure.
Yeah.
That's very cool. He went off on that one.
Yeah, absolutely popped off. And I wish... Like, you could make a plot out being like, how the fuck do I rule a country if I can't even...
find my way out of my house?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, what if it starts changing, like, actively trying to keep you in?
Yeah.
There's a lot of, like, horrifying potential there, and Robert Jordan wussed out a little bit of it, but...
Yeah, I don't need to know anything about Aramilla. Is the palace sentient? That would be sick.
Is there a Minotaur at the in the middle? Do we need a golden thread?
Yeah, tell me more.
So, who knows?
Tell me more.
Tell me more. Did it go very far? No. Our next section, tragically, will be from Rand, but I think Loyal gets married, so that's exciting.
That's exciting. Congrats to Loyal and Aerith.
Yes. And, at least Bashir's there, so we have that to look forward to. But thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Thanks to Glenna McKenzie for our theme song. Thanks to our patrons on Patreon and our followers on social media.
Yeah, and Emily referenced our billion bees and 4 feral raccoons from last episode. I wanted to send a special thanks to Julie McCormick, who did some really fun fan art of us as 4 billion, 1 billion bees and 4 feral raccoons. The raccoons in particular are extremely cute.
Very adorable.
They are so precious. So Julie, you did a really amazing job. Thank you. We love getting fan art, and I know it's a little self-indulgent, but I do legitimately love every time you guys create anything EHR related. So thank you for that. Julie loved it.
Yeah.
I really do wish I was a billion bees sometimes.
Yeah, right now I wish I was 4 feral raccoons. You know why? Because 4 feral raccoons would not be expected to have anything intelligent to say about Elaine. The world's worst lady.
Yeah. The world's worst.
The world's worst.
We should do, I know sometimes we do like favorite, least favorite character, which I guess we can start doing again if we need more airtime. We should do, like, an awards show.
Oh, an awards show?
Yeah,
like,
for Wheel of
worst,
Time.
Yeah,
Best, worst, and best.
Best in show.
Yeah, maybe for an upcoming episode, we'll have listeners suggest categories, and
that's a good one.
We'll vote.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have the expert and correct opinion, so
Of course.
you guys don't get to vote, you just get to suggest the categories.
How dare you imply otherwise?
Yeah, we're right.
Do you have a sign-off?
Do I have a sign-off? I had to... Don't worry. First of all, I'm fine. I had to go to the urgent care on New Year's Eve, which, like, of course I did. That's pretty, on the nose for my life. Again, I'm fine. Don't worry. But, of course, it was New Year's Eve, so it was, like, an extremely long wait. The urgent care was freezing. There was this child that kept looking at me, and, like, I know it's a child, but, like, leave me alone. And then, like, I seriously was at the urgent care for, like, 3 hours.
Yeah, you were gone a long time.
I was gone a really long time for, like, a relatively minor issue. It was extremely stupid. Which means that I watched the majority of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 in the waiting room of the urgent care on New Year's Eve. And, like, I'll admit that the first Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is pretty funny, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's got its moments. Like with many sequels, this one did not have a lot of ground to stand on. I did have a book with me, but, like, I was not feeling well, so I couldn't focus very well with just, like, a strawberry on screen screaming at me. So, Happy New Year to me, I guess.
Happy New Year to all of us, really. At least you, dear listener, didn't herald 2023 with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Duh.
Duh.
The squeakquel, as
The
Emily would
squeakquel.
say.
No, I love the squeakquel. All right, everyone.
We love you. Bye.
Bye.